If you're one of the people that pulls all the plants out of your garden the moment the frost hits in the fall, you're really missing out on a lot of really great harvests. In my opinion, the easiest and most affordable way to increase the amount of food that you grow for yourself right at home is to simply extend the amount of time that you're actually growing food in your garden. So I would say that my main crop here for this year was actually tomatoes, but this bed started the spring off with green onions, bok choy, and radishes. Early May, I planted in my tomatoes. Even while the tomatoes were growing here in the middle of the summer, I put in bush beans and I got a really nice harvest of bush beans. And when I took the bush beans out, I actually replaced them with these cabbages that you see here. An average person who pulls their plants out as soon as the first frost hits might have only grown tomatoes in this bed. I was able to get bok choy, radishes, green onions, tomatoes, of course, also bush beans, and now cabbages in one season from one bed. So I think if you're only growing one crop per bed in your garden and you're only planting between the last frost in the spring and the first frost in the fall, that you're really missing out on a lot of great vegetables. So when we're talking about extending the amount of time that we're growing food in our garden and increasing the amount of food that we're getting from the same space, I think there's really two key themes to discuss here. One is season extension, and two is growing cool season crops that are cold hardy, that actually want to grow through the winter. So the first thing I want to talk about is season extension, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's simply extending the amount of time that a certain crop can continue producing in your garden for. The example that I'm going to use here is actually my last summer crop, which is my peppers. This sheet of plastic is really their life support at this time of the year. I've gone now more than a month past my expected first frost date and I'm still picking peppers. So this is one of two main types of row covers. So this is a poly plastic, whereas another type of row cover would be an unwoven plastic fleece. This is not breathable. This is not permeable by air or water. And so one of the downsides to using this for a long term is that it raises the humidity significantly, which can be a benefit if you're trying to keep the temperature a little bit higher. Air with more moisture in it tends to hold on to heat a little bit longer than drier air. With these plastic covers, because of the higher humidity and the lack of airflow, you do run a higher risk of your plants succumbing to fungal diseases, whereas with the fleece row covers that do have a little bit more airflow, you run a much lower risk, but those plants will also have a little bit less heat to work with. So I find that if you're trying to simply extend the season on a plant like peppers by a few weeks, these plastic covers are great. They give you the best cold protection, they give you the best heat trapping ability. Now, as sad as it is to think about, unfortunately, I think these survivors here have hit the end of the road. It's looking like next week the temperatures are going to be going down into the -2, -3, maybe even -4 degrees Celsius range at night. And unfortunately, even with this plastic cover here, these peppers are just not going to make it. So what I'm going to do is take this cover off, harvest any peppers that are left, get these plants out, and then when I come back, we'll chat about cool season crops. It's very sad to see those peppers go, but given this is my garden, of course, the bed's not empty. The beds will never be empty in my garden. So about a month and a half ago, I planted some spinach and some tatsai underneath the peppers, and that has been growing alongside them since then. The peppers keep the spinach and tatsai protected from the warmer sun in the first half of fall. Unfortunately, I should have gotten these in the ground a little bit sooner, and I knew that I'm going to get a harvest a little bit later than I wanted to. That'll probably be around mid to late February. So I think this is a good transition into the second part of this video, which is talking about cool season crops, which are plants that actually like to grow in the shoulder seasons and even in some cases over the winter. A great example of that would be the spinach right here, or the cabbages behind me, or even this kale right behind me here. These are plants that actually prefer the cool season, and so although these kale plants have been here since the spring. They've been here all summer. These will continue cropping for me straight through the winter. I'll be continuing to pick kale for my smoothies all the way up until spring when these start to go to flower. And by that time, actually, I'll have new plants in the ground already ready to go and replace these. So I actually managed to get fresh kale from the garden any day of the year. Now I'm recording this video at the end of November, and unfortunately at this time of year, it is too late to start your fall and winter garden. You need to get your plants started a little bit sooner, and how much sooner really depends on the specific plant. So this plant here next to me is called a kaleette. It is a hybrid of kale and Brussels sprouts. Very tasty. I love to toss these in the air fryer with just a little bit of oil and a little bit of salt, and they're quite delicious. These are a very long season plant. I believe they're over 100 days to maturity, so these actually need to be started before my last frost date in the spring, and then these get planted around mid-May, and then they don't crop until November, December. I actually just picked my first crop of kaleettes last week, and this will have 1 or 2 more pickings, and so by mid-December this plant will be done. But I have some other Brussels sprout plants elsewhere in my garden that have actually not even started cropping yet. Last year I picked my final Brussels sprouts in January, so that just goes to show that some cold season crops are really also long season crops, and while they might be part of your fall and winter garden, you might actually be starting them in the late winter and planting them sometime in the spring. So make sure that you get your seed order in early and prepare for your fall and winter garden late winter, early spring. Now, beets are a really good example of this phenomenon that a lot of winter crops have, which is really one of the best reasons to be growing a winter garden, and that's that they taste better when they've been touched by frost. Beets, like other crops such as carrots, lettuce, brassicas like kale and cabbages, they produce sugars in order to prevent themselves from freezing, and those sugars give the plant a little bit of a sweeter taste. So with beets, it's actually a double crop. You have the leaves, which are great in salads, and the beets themselves, which are great in soups especially. I don't really like beets other than soups. Please don't hate me. These taste much better when they're grown in the fall and winter than they do when they're grown in the summer. These are carrots. Like the beets, you can leave them in the ground during the winter. They're very cold hardy. Even if it gets so cold that the tops might die off, the carrots themselves will be fine. As long as the ground doesn't freeze, you'll still be able to pull them out. And the carrots will have a much sweeter taste growing in the cold weather than they will growing in the summer. You really need to try the winter carrots. They'll blow your mind. And in addition to getting more vegetables, tastier vegetables, a greater variety of vegetables, there's a few other great perks about growing in the fall and winter, which is that as you get into the colder part of the year, there's going to be fewer insect pests. So while you still need to, in my opinion, check for some cabbage moth caterpillars on your cabbages, you should be seeing a whole lot less of them. You'll be seeing fewer aphids. You'll be seeing just fewer insect pests in general. And so these plants become way less maintenance. You're less worried about insects damaging them. You're less worried about them going to flower. And so these crops really become kind of a set it and forget it type of growing. So you put the plants in the ground, check them for pests a couple times in the fall, keep them covered, keep them protected from the cold winds, whether that's a poly cover if it's going to be very cold, or just a cover of fleece. And then when they're ready, you get to come out and harvest them and enjoy your very low effort crop. If you watched my video on growing garlic, you might recognize this cabbage here. His name is Janus. Janus has been in the ground for quite a few months. Now it has produced a really nice tight head here, and it looks like Janus actually has 2 additional side heads growing. So I'm going to just harvest this big one and bring it in, and we'll make a nice coleslaw with it tonight, and I'll leave the other 2 still growing. All right, well, I'm going to wrap it up there. I hope this video inspires a few people who've never tried before to take a shot at fall and winter gardening. I think it's a really great opportunity to grow a little bit more nutritious food right at home. So please give it a try if you never have before. And if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up below. Maybe consider subscribing. I do have some more videos coming out soon. Over the winter, I'm actually going to be trialing some methods of sprouting seeds and seeing how different methods stack up against each other. So if you're interested in that kind of content, definitely give me a follow and keep an eye out for those videos. I'm going to be doing at least 3 of those experiments over the winter time. If you'd like to share your experiences with fall and winter gardening, please leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear it. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. And one other little tip, with the really short days and the sun setting really early, I find that these cheap headlamps that you can get for hiking or running are really useful in the winter garden. So if you have one lying around, or if you can get a really good deal on one of those, these are great to have during the winter time.